Welcome to General Biology. This video is going to be on food webs, food chains, and some of the characteristics that go along with these food webs and food chains. There will be some vocab, and I'll go over kind of what each of those vocabulary words represents. So one of the vocab words is abiotic. So what is abiotic? Well, anytime you throw a in front of something, it means not. So, and bio means life. So when we say abiotic, these are going to be the non-living parts of a ecosystem. An ecosystem consists of all the living and non-living things in a particular area. So this would be the non-living stuff like water, sand, temperature, amount of rainfall, things like that are considered abiotic factors. Here's a list: weather, temperature, amount of sunlight, climate, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. So biotic factors are going to be the living parts. Okay, so they're going to be all the plants and animals and funguses and everything that's living in a particular environment. So if we look at producers, consumers, and then higher level consumers, those are all part of the biotic part of an ecosystem. We're not going to get real in depth into this right now, but there's a breakdown into how do we set up ecosystems. Individuals then get grouped into populations. Communities are all the living organisms in a particular ecosystem. An ecosystem is all the living and non-living parts of a particular area. And then a biome are areas that have similar ecosystems around the world. Populations have to be the same species. Communities are all the different species. When we say biomes around the world, we mean like rainforest. Tropical rainforest, for example, is a biome. You have the Amazon rainforest, you have the Congo rainforest, you have Indonesian rainforest, there's lots of rainforests. So those would all fall into the tropical rainforest biome. Even though they're different locations, they have similar weather conditions, and so they're in the same biome. So here's a bunch of terms. We're going to go into each one of these terms. You can jot down the definitions as you watch the video, but I'm going to go into what each one of these are. So an autotroph. Autotrophs are going to be things that make their own energy. Plants are a good example of autotrophs. They use sunlight to convert light energy into chemical energy through the process of photosynthesis. There's also something called a chemoautotroph. They're going to use a little bit different process, but they're going to make their own energy through chemosynthesis. Heterotrophs are going to be something that eats something else. Hetero means other. Troph means food, so they're going to eat something other for food. Autotroph meant self-food, so they're going to make their own food. Herbivores, also known as primary consumers, are going to be things that eat plants. You see a couple of examples here: pronghorn sheep, zebra, and a Galapagos tortoise. Those are all herbivores. Carnivores, also known as secondary consumers, okay, are going to be meat eaters. Okay, carni means meat, and vor means to eat. So carnivore, eat meat. Herbi means plant, vor, so plant eater. Okay. So here's a few examples of carnivores: tiger, bald eagle, great white shark. Omnivores are going to be primary and secondary consumers. Omni means all eater. Okay, so bears and raccoons and chickens, they'll eat whatever they can get their mouths on. And then detritivores, detritus is dead and decomposing stuff. So these are going to be organisms that eat dead and decomposing material. Now, how do these differ a little bit from a decomposer? We kind of consider these guys decomposers, but they literally have mouths and they are eating the material and breaking it down more in that way. Other types of decomposers will break things down by secreting digestive juices into the dead material and then absorbing those digested materials into their bodies. So things like bracket funguses and mushrooms, those are going to do it that way. So here's a food chain. A food chain is basically just a direct example of what eats what. Okay, there's no branching in a food chain. It's basically the locust eats the corn, the lizard eats the locust, the snake eats the lizard. Okay, the arrows represent energy. So energy is flowing from the corn to the grasshopper, and then to the lizard, and then to the snake. So the arrows represent energy flow through the food chain. And when we have multiple food chains all working together, we call that a food web. So here's an example of a food web. The difference between a food chain and a food web basically is just how many relationships are shown. So in a food web, even in a food web like the one we see here, it doesn't show all of the relationships, but you do get the idea that the grizzly bear will eat more than just one thing, is what it would show in a food chain. Or a hawk eats more than just one thing that we might see in a food chain. So it gives a little more idea of the eating relationships within an ecosystem. It's not totally correct. There would have to be hundreds of arrows going to the bear for it to be totally correct, and that would just be confusing. So they show a lot of the organisms that live in the ecosystem, but not even close to all.